Welcome in, guys. Adam here with Alesis Drums, and today we'll be covering everything you need to know about setting up the Nitro Pro e-kit. First up, let's quickly discuss all of the components that are included with your Nitro Pro. I highly recommend getting everything unboxed and organized before we get started. Doing so will make it much easier to keep up with this video as we go along. First, grab all of your black bars and clamps and keep those in one place. When assembled, these will create our drum rack, which is essentially the skeleton of the entire drum set. Also, make sure to find your 4 included L rods, which look like this, and set those aside with all of the other drum rack components. Next, we have our 4 drum pads, including one 10-inch snare drum and our 3 matching 8-inch toms. Set these aside along with our 3 black cymbal pads. Here we have the Nitro Pro drum module, also known as the brain. We're going to talk much more in depth about this module in other videos, but for now, set this aside along with your wiring harness, your power adapter, and your Velcro ties. And finally, you should have 2 foot pedals, one for the hi-hat and the other for the bass drum. Set these aside along with your mesh kick tower. And lucky for us, we can assemble the entire Nitro Pro with only one tool, a drum key. Alesis has put one in the box for you, but we all know you're going to lose that drum key before this video is over. So grab a spare drum key if you have one lying around and keep that handy. To begin assembling the rack, start by laying out the 4 largest black poles, which will all have feet on them. We'll lay these out parallel to each other on the floor, and we want to make sure that they're in this specific order. From left to right, you can see we have a single clamp on our first leg, 3 clamps on our second leg, 2 clamps on our third leg, and another single clamp on our last leg. From left to right, we'll call these legs A, B, C, and D, respectively. So legs A and D, or the outside legs, they can be set aside for now. We'll start by attaching legs B and C to each other with our middle crossbar. The middle crossbar is the curved bar that has 3 clamps on it. Before we attach this crossbar to our legs, you might have to loosen the clamps like so and slide them slightly towards the middle of this crossbar just to make some space on the ends. This middle crossbar will be inserted into the very top mounts of legs B and C. Now, to install a crossbar, just rotate that bar until the grooves are aligned with the mounts on the tops of legs B and C, and make sure that that crossbar is seated as deeply as you can get it inside of the mounts. Once the crossbar is inside of the mounts, tighten those mounts back down with your drum key, and we can now lay this U-shape down on the ground in front of us. Now, you'll notice that if you haven't fully tightened back down these mounts, we can actually slide our legs through the mounts. If you're setting this up for a child or someone on the shorter side, push these legs about 6 inches through the mounts and then tighten them down. If this drum set is for an adult, just keep the legs flush with the mounts like you see in this video. When these mounts are in the right position and the crossbar is still sitting deeply inside of the mounts, tighten everything back down with your drum key. Next, loosen the mounts here, just a few inches below the top mounts. Then, rotate these mounts so that the open holes are facing away from the center of the rack. Now, you should have 2 matching curved crossbars remaining, which will be inserted into the mounts that we've just loosened. Starting on our B leg, insert your crossbar into the mount as deep as it will go, and make sure that the curvature of this bar matches the curvature of that center crossbar that's already installed. Give the crossbar a slight upward tilt and snug the mount back down. At this point, we want the mounts snug but not fully tightened. Leave yourself just a little bit of play here so we can make adjustments in the next steps. Now hop over to your C leg and repeat this process with your last remaining curved crossbar. Insert the crossbar deeply into the mount, give it a slight upward angle, and tighten the mount so that it's snug. Now, with your A and D legs hopefully still nearby, go ahead and stand this structure upright. Now we can insert the ends of our crossbars into the mounts on legs A and D. This will allow our structure to stand up on its own, though admittedly, it's going to be a little loosey-goosey until we can get everything tightened down, so be cautious here. At this stage, carefully make your rounds and tighten down each mount with your drum key, remembering to double check that each crossbar is still seated deeply into its mount. It's also worth noting that while your crossbars may be at different heights from one another, they still need to be level against the ground for maximum stability. Now, you probably noticed that we still have one open mount on our B leg. Go ahead and loosen this mount and slide it up as high as it will go on the B leg. Now, grab this shorter, straight black bar with a single clamp on it. Take the open end of this bar and insert it into that open mount on the B leg. Rotate the bar so that it's pointed slightly towards the inside of our rack, and make sure to tighten this one down very well with the drum key, as it will be supporting a little bit of extra weight from our 10-inch snare drum. And now, the main skeleton of our rack is complete. Beautiful. Now to mount up our 4 drums, we start by grabbing our 4 included L-rods, which look like this. Before we install these L-rods, we first need to orient the clamps on our crossbars to face the right direction. Each of the clamps shown here should be rotated so that the hole where we insert each L-rod is facing towards us and not towards the ceiling. So we loosen the wing nuts here and simply rotate the clamps towards the center of the rack. This allows us to insert the black plastic part of the L-rod from the outside of the rack so that the silver bar ends up facing the ceiling. The L-rods will be a snug fit into these clamps, so give them a light bump with your hands to seat them all the way inside the clamps. When everything feels good, tighten these back down with the wing nuts. Once 3 of our L-rods are installed on the crossbars shown here, we can grab our last L-rod, which will go on that single lower pole that's for our 10-inch snare drum. Now we will revisit the L-rod soon to adjust the angles of our drums, but for now, just make sure they're all tightened down and that the silver part of the L-rod is pointed upwards. And now we're ready to install our drums. Grab your 3 matching 8-inch toms. Each of these are identical and will be placed on these 3 L-rods that are mounted on our crossbars. Make sure the wing nut on the back of each drum is loose, and then lower each drum onto the silver L-rods. As a starting point, I recommend that you only lower the drum about halfway down that L-rod, so you still have a little bit of clearance underneath the drum and it's not touching your rack. Now in terms of how high they should actually be, it depends on a lot of things, personal preference and how high you mounted your crossbars. There's no right answer here, so just eyeball a decent height for now, and we can still make plenty of adjustments later. If you run into a crowding issue with your rack toms, you can loosen the clamps on your crossbar and slide the drums left or right to make some space. For these rack toms, aim for no more than a 1-inch gap between the rims of the drums. And if you notice any of this side-to-side tilting, double check that you've tightened this wing nut here, which will keep the drum from rotating when you play. Now let's repeat this process one more time for the 10-inch snare drum. Remember that the snare sits on our lower dedicated bar with our last remaining L-rod. The snare should be kept level with your floor tom or the drum mounted farthest to the right. Now we can always fine-tune our drum's positions later, but for our snare drum specifically, it's recommended that you keep the drum floating over top of this black bar instead of off to the side of the black bar. Remember, the snare is not only our heaviest drum, but it's also the one that we play the hardest, so it will be much more stable if it's sitting over top of the black bar, as you can see here. Once you've double-checked that every component we've touched during drum installation is now tight and secure, we can move on to mounting our cymbals. Next, grab your 3 cymbal arms, which should be the only remaining components of our drum rack. These 3 arms get inserted into the remaining open clamps on the crossbars, but make sure to leave the farthest left clamp open, because this one is for our drum module. And it's worth mentioning that there are 3 different length cymbal arms. The shortest arm is for your hi-hats, the medium length arm is for your crash, and the longest arm is for the ride cymbal, but these can definitely be swapped around if you prefer different heights for these cymbals. Once the arms are installed, we'll open them up so that these wing nuts are facing the ceiling. Then, remove the wing nuts and the felt pads that are on the arms. We will need these soon, so keep them nearby. Now each cymbal arm will have a small black tab right here, and we want to make sure that this tab is facing away from the drummer. So we do this by loosening the cymbal arm here, rotating that tab to face outward, and we want to do this for all 3 of our cymbal arms. Now, for our 3 cymbal pads, you'll notice that one of them is slightly different than the other 2. The symbol that says with choke on the back is going to be placed here, on our middle crossbar, just to the left of our toms. The other 2 cymbal pads will go on the left cymbal arm here, and then the right cymbal arm here. When placing each cymbal pad, rotate the cymbal so that the black tab on the cymbal arm fits inside of the cutout on the bottom of the cymbal. This will prevent our cymbals from rotating when we play them. Once your 3 cymbal pads are on the cymbal arms, we can reinstall our felts and then our wing nuts. While doing this, remember that all cymbals are supposed to move a little bit, so tighten those wing nuts just enough to keep the cymbal secure, but leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room. That is perfectly normal. Okay, so our rack is sturdy, our drums and cymbals are mounted to the rack, and now it is time for the floor components. Now your kick tower is going to sit right underneath your middle crossbar, but it's the kick pedal itself that requires a little bit of quick assembly. To get your pedal set up, we only need to do 3 things. First, grab these silver bars on the underside of the pedal, squeeze them together, and then just slide the ends of these silver bars into the holes of your pedal like so, and release. Easy. Next, on the bottom of your pedal, there's a small clamp which is used to secure the pedal to the kick tower, making sure that the pedal is centered on the kick tower plate. Tighten the wing nut on the pedal to firmly connect the pedal and the kick tower together. Next, we have to attach our beater to the pedal itself, but I've got a tip for you that'll save you some time. First, grab your included drum key, keep it nearby. Now we'll insert the beater into the hole of the pedal that sits just to the right of the chain, with only about a ½ inch, maybe even a ¼ inch passing through to the other side. Then lift this beater upwards towards the pad of the kick tower. Here, adjust the beater to ensure that the black plastic is what touches the mesh pad, and hold the beater in this position centered on the mesh pad. Now with the free hand, grab that drum key and tighten down the beater at the hole where we first inserted it into the pedal, like so. Now we know that our beater will strike the kick pad in the perfect place every time. Now for the brains of the operation. The Nitro Max module is installed on the far left crossbar in our last open clamp. Take a moment to make sure that the module is comfortably facing you when you play, and then tighten it into place. Next, grab your cable snake, also called a wiring loom or a wiring harness. We'll plug this connector directly into the back of our module, but make sure to tighten it down with these 2 included screws, which can be found in the same bag as your included drum key. And now we are ready to run our wires. So you'll have this big bundle of cables hanging off of the back of your module at this point, but don't get overwhelmed because each one of these cables is clearly labeled, and we're just going to plug them in one at a time to the corresponding pieces of the drum set. Now drummers have different preferences for how they like to run their cables here, but my advice is to simply work from the left side of the drum set to the right side and keep the cables as neat as possible as you go using the included Velcro cable ties. Each cable is color-coded and labeled for your convenience. And one last thing before you grab your drumsticks, make sure to grab your drum key and tighten down all of these mesh heads. The heads are left intentionally loose during shipping, but when we tighten them down, the Nitro Pro has a much more realistic feeling when you're playing. Give each lug about a half turn to the right using a star pattern shown here, and that will ensure that the tension of each drum head is brought up evenly. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching this setup tutorial, guys. Adam here with Alesis Drums, and I will see you in the next one.